Times change. The marketing landscape changes. One thing that's been solid as a rock for decades is email. For scaling brands, we find that 65% of revenue in Klaviyo comes from buyers. And on a 7-day last click, we find that customer retention is 10 times more cost-effective than ads. Conversion rate optimization is even more cost-effective. Translation: if you aren't doing email, SMS, and CRO, you're spinning your wheels on new customers and spending way too much to drive revenue. Unfortunately, with the growth of e-commerce and the onslaught of email, Gmail and Yahoo are making it harder than ever to reach the inbox. The cheapest customer is the customer you already have, so if you need help with this mess, come to pallethouse.co, fill out the lead form, and ask to speak to me directly.
In the inbox late night, glowing screen, see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
We are going to walk through step by step how you can predict your 2026 email revenue. This is like crystal ball stuff. It is deceptively simple and also highly accurate. By the end of the year, you're going to go, wow, that was really close. 6 different components that we're going to project: campaigns, welcome emails, ready for people to subscribe, prospect, reactivation, continuation. These are the 6 components of your email system. Do this once at the beginning of 2026, and you've got an idea of what you're going to be doing for the year. It's the world's best email and retention podcast, and I'm your host, Jordan Gordon. We are a member of the DTC network of podcasts and the philosophical home of the Pilot House email and customer retention team. If you want to make the sweet nectar of low-cost revenue a large part of your digital ecosystem, then follow us on your favorite podcast app today. This time, we are going to walk through step by step how you can predict your 2026 email revenue. So this is like crystal ball stuff. I did this once on the brand side. This is the system I use to create targets. Bottom line, it is much more precise than you get in the advertising world. In the advertising world, there's a lot of like, well, we're going to increase that by 10%. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff just happens. And that's based on, gut instincts. If you've got a good media buyer, their gut instinct is good. So obviously trust your experts. But you can be more precise with email because rather than being at the mercy of how many impressions you get based on how good your bid goes, with email, you're precise about how many emails you send, right? It's why it's called outbound, right? You control that. And on the brand side, one year, I remember I did this, it was a big domain. I forget what my revenue target for the year was. It was, in the millions of email revenue, in the millions of Google Analytics revenue. I used this system and I was within $50,000 at the end of the year. So like incredibly accurate. So we have been lifting and shifting a little bit to focus on Joe Ecom, you know what I mean? Who's just trying to get by, just needs tips and tricks to improve his channel. So we went through a bang up 12 tile Klaviyo dashboard plus to help you understand what's going on. Okay, well, here's how you can sit down and you can figure out, you can look at what you need to hit, what your targets are. You can run this and you're going to know, am I going to hit my targets? Right? And you can make adjustments that way. So I will go through the simple part and then sometimes I'll say advanced, like an extra thing you can do for this. Okay. So first you need a couple of warm-up numbers, and a couple of numbers that you're going to use repeatedly throughout this. The first is the top of funnel growth factor, right? So what does the advertising team say they're going to grow top of funnel revenue or whatever it is? Maybe their target is sessions, but probably their target is top of funnel revenue. Whatever that growth factor is, the growth that the Shopify growth that they expect to provide from Meta, Google ads, all that kind of stuff, you need to put that together and say, yeah, this is how much we think the top line is going to grow. And they're going to have that number. And something to keep in mind, if their number already includes email growth, you're going to have to back the email growth out. You know what? That's a negotiation between you and that team. Bottom line, you're going to go to them and say, what's going to happen on the top line, right? Is it going to be 20, 50, 100? You need to know that. And the second thing you're going to need So that's what they're growing. That's the income statement. And then there's the balance sheet. The balance sheet is your audience, right? So you want to know how much that is going to grow. And so the simplest way is to take your mailable list. Remember, we went to the amazing 12 tile model, and on there was a list segment growth for starred segments. You want to star your mailable list. That is the people that you should have one list that includes everything that you think is safe to email. And maybe you're hitting them with other segments and doing all kinds of stuff, but you need to have a list in there, a segment in there that's like, this is what we're emailing, right? If you don't have that, measurement's difficult, but also if you don't have that master list, then how are you going to know what to suppress when, you're going to suppress bad addresses and stuff? So bottom line, have a single list that is everything that you think is okay to email, and have all of your segments play within that. So you have in that 12 tile system, growth of starred segments, and you just star your mailable list, right? And then maybe some supplementary ones, like if you've got implied consent is a separate list or something like that. It's okay, but don't star everything. And importantly, only star segments that have engagement windows so that people who are falling out can properly fall out. Go back and check out that episode for more details on that, please. But bottom line, so first you've got the growth from top of funnel. That's a number they're going to give you. And this one, you're going to go and look at that report that says how big your lists were a year ago, your starred segments, right? If you don't have that from a year ago, I mean, look, you can do 3-month growth, you can do 6-month growth. It's fine, right? You just want a growth rate to apply. And also, you can just look at the list, and within every segment, you can go and you can click on segment growth, and you can look at it that way and see where it was a year ago. But as you can see, what do we need to start understanding what's happening? Well, one, we got to know what's happening at the top of the funnel. That's the income statement. That's what's going through. And 2, we got to know the balance sheet. That's our audience. If you don't know what the size of your audience last year, what are you doing? Right? So this might just be a message of mercy, the first part, where we can't even get to the stuff to figure out what's going to happen if you don't know what's happening with your list. If your list is 20% smaller than it was last year, don't expect to have higher revenue. Right? So understanding the change in your list size is critical. And we talked about customer base in around episode 30s in there somewhere, and super important, but that is not email specific. Your mailable list is the email specific audience that you have to reach. So go and look at how that's been growing. Simple way to do this is if it's been up 20%, kind of year over year, just apply 20%. If the top of funnel growth factor that you're getting is crazy, like they expect to just blow it out of the park, then apply some of that to this compound growth rate for your list to grow your list, right? But that's a little bit more subjective. For sure, just go and say, how has it been growing? And just assume that growth is going to continue, because your list is, again, it's a balance sheet. So addresses go in and it takes them, sometimes a year or two to fall out in the end. So you can have a lot of volatility at the top of funnel growth factor that can be very volatile, and it will be much less volatile in your list because that's like a buffer. People go in there, they hang around, they open, they click. So don't just, if they say top of funnel is growing by 50%, don't just grow your mailable list 50% in these projections, because it's more stable. But you might take how it's been growing and apply a bit more, and you can just use your better judgment. So those 2 numbers going in: how fast is my income statement growing? My top of funnel. How fast is my balance sheet growing? My mailable list. Okay, so now there are 6 different components that we're going to project: campaigns, welcome emails, right after people subscribe, prospect reactivation continuation. So that's like after the welcome is done, long-standing flows that go for a long time and continue speaking to people. Not everybody has these. If you don't have them, don't worry about it. But if you do, we're going to project that as well. And then post-purchase, so right after someone purchases, and then buyer reactivation continuation, which is long-standing flows that go for a long time after someone buys. should happen for at least a year. I mean, be careful about blowing it out on the long end. If you send these for a long time, you can actually damage your sending reputation by messaging stuff that's really not going to perform well. So, but you know what? You should have a 1 year reactivation. I see you also have like a 2 month. Like, come on, what's that going to do? So yeah, your buyer reactivation continuation, which is long-standing emails that go to someone after someone purchases. And then finally, your abandoned emails. So campaigns, welcome, prospect reactivation continuation, post-purchase, buyer reactivation continuation, and abandonment. And what you'll notice here is campaigns, that's going to both buyers and prospects. Abandonment is going to both buyers and prospects, right? And then we've got basically recent subscribe, stale subscribe, recent buyer, stale buyer. 6 different components. These are the 6 components of your email system, and everything kind of should bucket in there. There are some weird things like, I don't usually include loyalty in this, so loyalty is kind of this weird, funny thing off on the side. But broadly speaking, these are the 6 components of your email program. Anything that is supposed to drive revenue should be in here. And you shouldn't have a whole lot in your email system that's not trying to drive revenue. So what we're going to do is project the revenue in each of these components. And the most important ones, we've discussed it before. The most important ones, campaign, really important on the very beginning. Abandonment, very important. And the stuff in the middle is actually, welcome is pretty important, but some of this other stuff is not as important because the benefit of it doesn't really show up in revenue. Like the benefit of reactivation continuation doesn't show up in revenue. What it shows up in is someone opened an email and they get back in your campaigns. So I would say of this list of 6, if you got campaign, welcome, and abandonment right, you could just actually take the other 3. Like if you want an easy trick, take the other 3 and just multiply it by the growth factor. You know what I mean? Right? Or something like that. Or multiply it by your compound list growth that we got, those 2 different growth factors. Or multiply them by the average of the 2. The other 3, after campaign, welcome, and abandon, they're not as important revenue-wise. They're very important strategically, but their benefit shows up elsewhere. Their benefit shows up in abandonment. Their benefit shows up in campaigns. So you could just say, take the average of your top of funnel growth factor and your compound year-over-year list growth and just apply it to those 3 just as a factor for how the revenue is going to change. And you'd probably be fine. Still, we will go through all 6. Okay. So first, campaigns. You want to predict your campaign revenue for 2026. Well, take your mailable list, right? You have your mailable list number. You multiply it by the number of campaigns that you're going to send, which you can just figure it out. Are you doing 2 a week, right? So your mailable list times the number of campaigns you're going to send in 2026 times the revenue per email sent of your campaign program. That number is not available in Klaviyo. It's this simple. Go and take the last 12 months of campaign revenue and go to, there might be an easier way to get this, but I get this from custom reports. I just pull campaign revenue for the last 12 months. You can also get campaign revenue for the last 12 months in your dashboard. And I take campaign emails sent by just, running a 12-month campaign report. And you're going to get your campaign emails sent. These are 2 numbers that are very easy to get. All the campaign revenue, all the emails, all the campaign emails sent, divide them, and you get the revenue per email sent. This is such an amazing metric. It's incredibly stable. I've found that, companies that sells a $3,000 item will have the same revenue per email sent as a company that sells $30 items. And what happens is you just get a lower conversion rate on the $3,000 item. Less people buy. But the way I think about this number being very stable across verticals is that consumers spend so much. Consumers reach into their pocket. One consumer is the same as the next consumer when it comes into reaching into their pocket. So revenue per email sent is an amazingly stable metric. Also fairly stable over time when you go to this macro one. So we just did your mailable list. You have the number right there. Of course you do, right? You've taken your whatever you mail, and of course you split it up by prospect and buyer. You've been listening to the World's Best Email and Retention podcast for like a year. So you've already split that up by prospect and buyer. You have that mailable list, you multiply it by the number of the campaigns you're going to send times the revenue per email sent of your campaign program. And that's going to be your campaign revenue. It's going to be very, very close. Now, what are some advanced things? One, of course, multiply the list, the mailable list that you inputted, by that growth factor that you predict. So how has it been growing for the last 12 months? Well, assume it's going to keep growing that much. Or, assume it's going to keep growing that much and then wiggle it a little bit based on the top of funnel growth factor. So then you'd have an adjusted mailable list, and you multiply that by the number of messages that you're going to send, the number of emails you're going to send, and multiply that by the revenue per email sent. And the other advanced thing you can do is, if you're going to change this is quite advanced, but if you're on the brand side, I mean, running this analysis once a year it's not too much to ask, right? You should track your promotional emails, basically anything with a discount, separately from we'll call them launches and features. Super advanced, you do your launches and features separate because launches also drive a lot of revenue. If you had launch, feature, and campaign as 3 separate kinds of emails, you would calculate the revenue per email sent for each of those separately. And then you would look at the mix of launches, features, and promotions you're going to send over the next 12 months and apply those separate revenue per email sent by the number of campaigns. Because promotional emails have a higher revenue per email sent. So if you were going to change your promotional mix and be like, whoa, we're doing way more discounting this year or way less discounting this year, then you would want to do the mailable list times the number of promotional campaigns times the promotional revenue per email sent, launch campaigns times the launch revenue per email sent, feature campaigns times the feature revenue per email sent. You'd want to do that if you were heavily changing your promotional mix. But if you aren't significantly changing that mix, then you don't need to do that. You just do the adjusted list, which is your current mailable list, times the year-over-year growth rate in that list that you predict, which is just the last 12 months of growth rate, times your campaign revenue per email sent. So it is deceptively simple and also highly accurate. By the end of the year, you're going to go, wow, that was really close. One thing I didn't mention is what kind of revenue you're going to use. I mean, you can do platform revenue for this. You can do MTA, triple whale, right? One thing I'll say is that if you're heavily scaling up the number of campaigns that you're going to send, then your click-based MTA revenue per email sent is going to change, is going to be more elastic and change faster than your platform revenue per email sent. It's just the way it is. Platform revenue per email sent is more sticky. Click-based MTA revenue per email sent, like Google Analytics, Triple Whale, even the one in Klaviyo, that one is less sticky and more volatile and will change. So another thing to keep in track is if you're going to double or triple the number of emails that you're going to send and you're doing a click-based revenue per email sent, you're going to have to bring down your predicted revenue per email sent. That's campaign. Okay? I mean, I did a lot of little talk in there, but really it's list times campaigns that you're going to send times revenue per email sent, right? Okay, remember on the amazing, super duper 12 tile dashboard that I put together, the first thing on the list growth and the inboxing and list growth tile, the first thing was subscribers. How many people are subscribing? Well, who gets your welcome email? People who subscribe. So you take your subscribers for the last 12 months and you multiply it by the top of funnel growth factor. And that's how many subscribers you predict you're going to get in the next 12 months. You multiply that by the number of emails in your welcome flow and the welcome flow revenue per recipient. Why did I say revenue per recipient and not revenue per email sent? Because Klaviyo, for some reason, used a different name for this thing. It drove me crazy. So if you go into your flows in Klaviyo, by every single flow is something that says revenue per recipient. Oh, okay. So you multiply that by the number of emails in that flow, by the number of subscribers you predict that you're going to get, and you've got your welcome revenue. So your revenue per recipient, which is revenue per email sent, times your number of emails in the welcome flow, times your previous 12 months subscribers, multiplied by the top of funnel growth factor. It's quite simple, right? It's like, again, how many people are getting it? How many messages? What's the revenue per message? Okay? So you would, there's your welcome revenue. Then you've got your prospect reactivation continuation. These are flows that go out to prospects after they have gone through the welcome flow, but they're still prospects, so they haven't purchased yet. These flows are notoriously crappy. They drive low revenue and they're often bad for your inboxing. So you don't need them. You can use them if you're smart about it. You can have flows like this. If I had to pick any one of these that I would just walk away from, if I was having difficulty with my email program, I'd walk away from this. Like weird sunsets to prospect. It's like, you know what? If you're sunsetting it, it's a crappy address. Just sunset it. Don't send a bunch of crap to these guys. They always hit spam. You got a higher unsubscribe rate, which Gmail doesn't like. You got low engagement. These flows are stinkers and the worst thing on this list of 6. But if you do have them, so you do your prospect mailable addresses. Remember, if you remember back to the very beginning episodes of the World's Best Email Retention Podcast, I told you to take your list that you send to and clone it. And on one say has placed order 0 times overall time. On the other has placed order 1 times overall time. And you've got your prospects and your buyers. It's the first thing you would do to optimize your campaign program. Super low lift. So that means you have your prospect mailable. You have the prospect list that you send to. So you multiply that by the number of emails in these flows, right? Your prospect reactivation continuation, the kinds of flows that keep on going after subscribe for people who haven't purchased. And you multiply that by the revenue per recipient. Look, if you've got like 2 or 3 of these flows, then you do the number of emails in the first one times the revenue per recipient, the number of emails in the second one times the revenue per recipient, the number of emails in the third one times the revenue per recipient, because they've each got a different revenue per recipient, right? And you multiply that by the prospect mailable list. And you're going to get your prospect reactivation continuation revenue. And of course, advanced, what would you do? You would multiply that prospect list by the growth factor that you had for your list. You looked at your list and you're like, how's my list growing? Oh, it's up 20% year over year. You just assume it's going to grow 20% again, right? And the simplest way to do that would be to increase your factor up your mailable list by 10%, because it's half the growth is going to happen, in the second half of the year. You know what I mean? You can also you can project this out month by month and compound it, of course, if you're really nerdy. I am. But anyway, point being, take that prospect mailable list and factor it up, because you know how much your mailable list is going to grow over the course of the next 12 months. And just assume your prospect list will grow like that. That's advanced, right? So you take your adjusted prospect mailable list, the adjusted number of size of the list, which is the number of addresses in it times how you know your list is going to grow, how you predict your list is going to grow, and multiply that by the number of emails in the flow, multiply that by the revenue per recipient, which is in Klaviyo, right next to the flow. It says it right next to every single flow, revenue per recipient. All you got to do for any of these flows is take that revenue per recipient, multiply it by the number of messages in the flow, multiply that by your prospect list. That's how much revenue you're going to make from these. Little footnote, that would mean the prospect list has to go for the entire duration of your mailable list. So if that if this is only like one email that goes a month after and that list has 4 months of people, you're not going to get full coverage. So I do assume that if you've got kind of a mailable list, that your flows go for the duration of that. And again, this is one of those flows where you could just be simple and take the revenue and multiply it by the average of the top of funnel revenue growth and the list growth that you've projected. Just multiply it by the average of those two. And you'll probably get fine results. Okay, that's your prospects. We've done campaign, welcome, prospect. And it's simply the number of people times the number of emails times the revenue per email sent, or the revenue per recipient. Post-purchase. Okay, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the number of people times the number of emails times the revenue per recipient. It's going to be the same thing. And so it's just all about the little details, right? So how are we going to get the number of recipients that are going to receive this? Well, go into Shopify, click on your repeat rate. In analytics, repeat rate, go to the top right corner, download 12 months of buyers. It's going to give you your all buyers for the last 12 months, and it's going to give you repeat buyers for the last 12 months. All buyers minus repeat buyers, you're going to get first-time buyers, right? So your number of first-time buyers times your top-of-funnel growth rate. So you got the top-of-funnel growth rate from your partners in advertising. So we have how many first-time buyers we had in the last 12 months? Multiply that by the top-of-funnel growth factor, and you get the number of 12 first-time buyers you're going to get over the next 12 months. That's how many people are going to go through post-purchase, right? Assuming it's for new buyers. So So that times the number of post-purchase emails in the flow times the revenue per recipient of the post-purchase email flow. And boom, you've got your revenue for post-purchase over the next 12 months. Super easy. Then buyer reactivation continuation. This one is more important than the prospect reactivation continuation because, about 2/3 of revenue in Klaviyo is buyer. So it's actually moving the needle. So we take our buyer mailable list. Remember, we had our prospect mailable list before. Now we got the buyer mailable list. It's your list that you email, restricted to only the buyers. And you multiply that by your list growth factor, which is, hey, the list has grown 20% in the last year. We're going to assume it's going to grow 20% in the next year. If we got this crazy number from top of funnel growth that they're saying the top of funnel is going to grow 50%, obviously bump that thing up. Hey, take the average of the two, right? That is your buyer mailable list. Multiply that by the number of emails in your reactivation continuation and multiply that by the revenue per recipient of that flow or those flows in Klaviyo. If you've got two of these flows, then you do the number of emails in one times the revenue per recipient in one, the number of emails in the other one times the revenue per recipient in the other one, and you multiply those by the size of that list. And this assumes that this flow covers that list in duration. So if you've got a 180-day list, the length of your list should actually be different by trigger point. That's too in the weeds. But basically, let's just say your mailable list is 6 months. Well, then you have to have at least 6 months of emails in here. So yeah, you got the buyer mailable list times the list growth factor times the number of emails in that flow times the revenue per recipient of that flow, just like every single one. The list size, the number of emails, the revenue per recipient. You've got your buyer reactivation continuation flow revenue. Should not be too high. This one, the benefit of this is getting the opens and getting them back into campaigns. The benefit of this is seen in campaigns. That's why none of this stuff, the benefit of these flows, it doesn't show up in your MTA or anything like that. You need to have your own measurement systems for the 4 quadrants. Go back and look at my episode where we discussed recent stale prospect buyer, recent buyer stale buyer, recent prospect stale prospect, 4 quadrants. Go look that up because you need to measure those 4 quadrants to actually understand what's happening in your list. Because MTA software is like, yeah, it's a click, right? And doesn't really differentiate too much on those clicks if it's someone that's just come out of your ads funnel or not. Okay, last one, abandonment. So again, it's going to be the list times the number of emails times the revenue per recipient. You're going to have 4 of these: site, browse, cart, checkout, maybe some more. So you'd have to do this individually for each one. But first we have to arrive at the list size, which is going to be the number of sessions. Every time someone hits your site, it triggers abandon, assuming that you've got abandoned site and you've got full coverage. So you take your 12-month sessions and you multiply it by your growth factor, right? How much do we think the top of funnel is going to grow our site traffic, right? In the weeds, you could apply some email traffic growth factor in there as well, but easy to just use your top of funnel growth factor. So how many sessions you've had in the last 12 months times how the advertisers think they're going to grow your top of funnel times, and this is new, the 12-month abandonment emails per session. Why something new? Why not just the number of abandonment emails? You don't know. Like, someone can enter your abandon, they get 1 site abandon email, and then they put something in their cart and they get 1 cart email, then they check out. They got 2 emails. Someone else could get 5 emails from your abandoned cart system. People can plinko all over the place in your abandoned cart system and get a totally different number of emails. So you can't just say, oh, people are going to just go through and get all the emails. That's not how abandonment works. You should have some rules to make sure this thing isn't just like crazy spamming people. In the very least, smart sending rules, but also rules that, like, hey, someone made it to the abandoned cart, so don't send them abandoned browse email because we don't want them to re-enter the catalog somewhere else. We want them to convert their cart that they're on. All those kinds of rules. Because of those, it's difficult to predict how many abandonment emails someone will get when they hit your site. So you simply look at the last 12 months of sessions and the last 12 months of all abandonment emails, and you have abandonment emails per session. It's actually a really cool metric that I don't use this too often, but sometimes I do. I mean, here I'm using it right now, but it's like a really cool metric you can look at over time to be like, hey, like, let's say you change your abandonment system. Well, okay, am I getting more abandonment emails sent? Well, what if your site traffic's changing? What do you want to index that to? You want to index that to your sessions. So it's not like, yeah, hey, my abandonment emails sent are up. Well, what if your site traffic's up 40%? Yeah, of course, your abandonment sent emails are up. So abandonment emails per session is the metric that you use to measure abandonment volume. Okay? So you take your 12-month sessions that you had last year, multiply it by your top of funnel growth rate. So every single time you notice, we're multiplying it by our top of funnel growth rate or multiplying it by our list growth rate. And I'll wrap up and tell you as a rule which one you're using in any one situation. But you take your 12-month sessions, your top of funnel growth rate, multiply it by the abandonment emails per session for the last 12 months. And if you double the number of abandonment emails you have for whatever reason this year, you're going to have to fudge that number a bit, right? And then you multiply that by the revenue per recipient. Okay. So if you got 4 of these, you got to do if you have site, browse, cart, checkout, you got to do site emails per session times site revenue per recipient, browse emails per session times browse revenue per recipient, cart emails per session times cart revenue per recipient, checkout emails per session times checkout revenue per recipient. It's a little bit involved. Yeah, but you do this once at the beginning of 2026, right? And you've got an idea of what you're going to be doing for the year. So yeah, your list times your, this time, emails per session. So your sessions that we're predicting times your emails per session times your revenue per recipient. Okay? So this is the only one that's indexed on sessions. And to wrap up, you're always applying your top of funnel growth factor or your compound year-over-year list growth prediction. And so when we think back on this, you want things that are based on very recent things, like your welcome and which is based on subscribes, and your post-purchase, which is based on purchases. That's multiplied by your top of funnel growth factor. Because someone comes in, they do it, and then they're out. They don't get it again. So we just index it to the top of funnel growth factor. Things that are going to the bulk, campaigns are going to the bulk, your prospect and buyer reactivation continuation that send for a long time, going to the bulk of your list. Those ones, the factor that we apply to the send size, to the list, is the predicted year-over-year list growth, right? So one that goes to a recent event, top of funnel growth factor. One that goes to the bulk of your list, you apply your list growth factor, right? And then finally, abandon. It is a recent event as well. So we're going to treat it like welcome and post-purchase. It is a recent event, but the recent event is a session. So we apply our top of funnel growth factor to our predicted sessions, right? So top of funnel growth factor to subscribe, top of funnel growth factor to purchase, top of funnel growth factor to site visit, right? Or list growth factor, predicted list growth factor to entire list, to prospect list, or to buyer list. That's how you do this. We're 37 minutes in. If you listened to this, you probably got some ideas swirling around in your head. If you just hit a spreadsheet or have maybe an analyst of yours hit a spreadsheet with this, you're going to come back with something pretty good. You don't need to do exactly what I said here. You're going to get a lot of value if you just kind of hammer through this. And again, think about how the main thing is, of course, the list, the send list, times the number of emails, times the revenue per recipient, or revenue per email sent in the campaign case where you have to calculate that, to calculate the revenue per email sent for campaigns yourself. I think. I do. I calculate it for myself. Maybe you can find it somewhere in Cludio. Super valuable. Run this. I'd love to hear what you think, right? You think this thing works? Feel free to come to pilothouse.co, fill out the lead form, and talk to us if you ran this thing and you want to just talk about it all. Can't wait to hear from you. All right, entrepreneurs, executives, spammers, and webmasters, have fun spamming.
In the inbox late night, glowing screens see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
Hey entrepreneurs and spammers, remember, you can't scale without email, and the cheapest customer to acquire is the customer you already have. So please subscribe to the world's best email and retention podcast and learn how to make low-cost revenue a big part of your digital ecosystem.